Ladies and gentlemen, Kirk Thatcher and Darren Doctorman, the Weirded Beardos. Oh, hello. It's you.
It is. And it's them.
And it's them. Welcome.
Oh, there's my hand.
Here's my hand. Take
Here's
it.
my
Join
hand.
us, friend.
Welcome back to
Welcome back to the Bearded Weirdos.
another level of hell. Oh, bearded or whatever. Well, yeah, that's
It's not the Bearded Weirdos. That's what's funny about it. We're the Weirded Beardos.
that's what I said.
We're different than other weird Beardos. We're weirded before we're Beardos.
What he said. Wherever you're sitting in the end result. How do you edit these always on that? Because whenever we shoot these, I'm on the left, you're on the right. But is that how they appear to the world at large when you're edited, or no?
Well, they appeared the way I edit them.
That's what I meant.
With you on the left and me on the right.
Oh, okay, so that's how it is. So if I'm pointing to you now, then I will.
That's not. No, I'm on the other side.
Oh, okay, on my monitor, so it's not flipped. So yeah, on my monitor, you're over here.
Right. And you're over here, but you're actually over here.
But I'm not. I'm here. Anyway, this supposed to be
Anyway,
fun,
howdy. We're here again.
Yeah. It's supposed to be hilarious on the podcast. Kirk is pointing camera left. And
Right.
Darren is explaining. Yeah. Anyway.
And the rest
Hi,
of
we're
the
back.
podcast is mainly visual. So, sorry.
Yeah. Today's podcast will be on the salon.
So we're dropping this episode pretty close to Halloween. So
Yay.
today's episode is brought to you by the letter H and the number 31.
So that's my little nod to Halloween. A monster in the background.
What are you pointing to?
There's a little ghoul. Can you see it? A monster mask.
Oh, no, I can't see it because you're cropped in my view. So
Oh, did I crop my? I cropped.
you cropped your pants? What?
Cropped my pants. Thanks. I cropped my pants. Well, there's a monster mask or two behind me, but I guess.
So how was Halloween for you when you were growing up? Because
was
I
my
know
favorite holiday.
it was very special for me.
Yeah. Ever since, I mean, I loved Christmas when I was little, and then I kind of, because Halloween, I think my mom, when I was around 3 or 4, maybe 4, or my brother was 4 and I was 5, she made us black cat costumes, like little onesies. And we had black ears and tails, and we would go trick or treating.
That sounds adorable.
There's pictures of us down at Park La Brea where my grandmother lived, and there was an outdoor, you could go get candy. And I started going, well, this is cool. I love the play aspect of it and the dress up of, being a creature.
You know the famous person who lived in Park La Brea?
Mm-mm.
Charlton Heston.
Really? Like in the apartments?
Yeah.
Wow, my grandparents lived there, and my aunt and uncle.
Was your uncle Charlton Heston?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's your candy, you damn dirty kids.
Julius.
No. So
you went there to visit, and you had Halloween there.
Yes, and I think that was when, and then we used the same outfits at this little nursery school we went to here in Van Nuys, California. And we had a Halloween parade or something where everyone came. And I think that's when I started falling in love with it. And then going to Disneyland, seeing the Haunted Mansion, kind of flipped my wig, and Frankenstein, movies, particularly Bride of Frankenstein. Suddenly, Halloween became my favorite holiday. I think it started as Christmas, but by the time I was 5, it was Halloween, and has been ever since. And then I read Ray Bradbury stories about the Halloween. Was it the Halloween tree? And
yeah.
Something Wicked This Way Comes, which is very focused in October and Halloween. And it was like he was channeling my inner thoughts, like the smell of leaves and the dry in LA. It's kind of a dry, but it's cooler air. And the longer or the shorter days, it gets darker earlier and stays darker in the morning. It's dark until 6 or 7. So I just fell in love with it. And then I started monster makeup and all the things that I loved to do, and became a lot of my career. So yeah, it was, and I find that most artists and people in the film industry, that maybe it's birds of a feather, tend to be that's their favorite holiday.
I think it tends to be like that because we made our own costumes. and there was the
Yeah,
store-bought ones were never enough.
right. They were disappointing. I remember.
Yeah,
I think I got a Spider-Man one because it looked
yeah,
great on the box. And you get it out; it's just a little vacuum formed, like
yep,
not even a half face. It's like a plate you can put over your head,
yeah.
and
I
then
had
just the
that one.
one printed. Yeah,
I had that one, and there's a picture of Spider-Man on the front, and
right.
I said,
Exactly.
Spider-Man doesn't have a picture of
Yeah.
himself on his
Well,
outfit.
mine was the knockoff where it was like green and red, and it was like it had the
Oh,
big red lips, and it was like not Spider-Man at all,
so it was the
but
Mexican Spider-Man.
something like that. And then I remember one year there was a magic shop at the farmers market in near Park La Brea,
Mm-hmm.
and my grandmother would take me there, and on our birthdays we could buy whatever we wanted, one thing, and they had a rubber monster mask, which is this green kind of,
Right.
I don't know, mummy sort of mask, and it was like $20 or whatever,
Yeah.
which was a lot back in the
Horribly
day.
expensive at the time.
Right, and my grandmother was like, I don't know, and that wasn't it wasn't the $20. So she goes, that's really ugly. And I'm like, and I said, it's okay. She goes, well, I think we'll have to ask your mother. I'm like, she'll be okay with it. And so I bought it. I remember I'd wear it and be like, and then that was my Halloween costume, and that
Right.
kind of began my love for masks and makeup.
Sure.
And then the Don Post, man, those things. I just thought Don Post mask at the back, the back of Famous Monsters.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, again, if you read Famous Monsters, it's Halloween all year round. But those masks looked amazing. When the mole people and Frankenstein and the kind of the lurid colors when they were in color. Most of the time, it was black and white newsprint, and they were like $60. And I remember
Yeah.
or 70, whatever. It was
Yeah.
completely
It
unattainable.
might as well have been
Yeah,
50 grand. Yeah.
yeah. And your parents are not going to drop 60
Never.
bucks on a monster mask.
For,
Yeah, I
for,
think,
for that thing? Are you kidding?
when are you going to
Shut
wear it?
up. Get back in the car.
Yeah, when are you gonna wear it? Halloween? Oh,
Yeah.
one night a year. That's not worth. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I would play that out of my head before even asking, so I knew
Sure.
it was an impossible dream.
You knew what the answer would be.
Yeah. So yeah, it just kept growing and growing, and then I started doing my own little haunts on our front porch. For one year I got my mom to wear a black furry gorilla suit tube I'd made to wear, look like a gorilla suit arm, and a black leather glove, and she would. We had something that they don't have anymore in homes: milk doors. It was a little uh,
Yeah.
cabinet, but the door went to the outside
Right.
and open on the inside. So while the kids were at the door saying trick or treat, my mom would reach through and
Oh my
go like
gosh,
this,
that's
and then scare.
hilarious.
Yeah, and I would do werewolf makeup and then run up behind them, and that was it. I was hooked, man.
It's so cool because my my dad had this Frankenstein rubber mask that he apparently had wore to some Halloween party back in the early '60s. When he and my mom were footloose and fancy free, and
Childless.
yeah, childless. Yeah,
Yeah.
the wonderful 6 years before I was around, and so this was amazingly interesting to me. Because I'd never seen anything like it in stores ever.
Right. Well,
But
yeah.
it was way cool, and I just found it very fun that my dad would dress up in this, and
Right.
he didn't anymore, right?
Right. This was,
So
yes.
this is
The version of your father you did not
a
know.
version of my father I didn't know, but I thought it was way cool, and so I was very always looking forward to Halloween time, especially at school when they used to let us dress up at school
Right. And
for that one day
yeah.
before Halloween. Maybe
We always called it like a parade or a costume parade or something where
yeah.
I remember sixth grade, I think it was fifth or sixth grade. I'd started at a new school, and my mom, I loved Sesame Street monsters. Sesame Street was fun, but I was like, but I love the monsters and the funny creatures they were. So my mom helped me make in fact, that's where the black furry arm came from.
Right.
Like a Sesame Street monster. So we took a hat box and kind of put it over my head, and we put foam over it, and then glued and sewed black fur and put ping pong ball eyes on it, a big red nose. And I sort of looked like Sweetums, if you know.
Right.
and so I just walked around like that. And my mom was cute. She was a teacher, so she was good with handling kids. And I didn't, as hammy as I am now, I didn't really get because I was on the spectrum.
You
Like,
didn't
how?
get into the performance.
Yes, she's like, no, no, you need to walk like this, and I'm like, no,
Hmm.
no, that's stupid. I don't
Yeah,
want to do that. I look dumb.
you were shy.
I was actually, and I was like, I love the costume. I like wearing it, but and it was funny when I was a werewolf thing. When I put the werewolf makeup on, then I could be like, "Arr," but
Yeah,
this thing, I just, and then so she worked with me to be like, and I remember at the costume contest at school, I kind of walked out with it, and then realized, oh right, I have to do the monster walk, and I kind of went, like this, and huge laughs and like
sure.
applause and everything. It's like, oh, okay, she does know what she's talking about.
Yeah,
And that was kind of one of the first costumes I'd ever made, besides just putting makeup on my face and
right.
hands for the werewolf vampire stuff. But my mom was super supportive. My dad just thought I was nuts. I think I remember he was worried about me reading Famous Monster because it had
Well,
skulls and fangs.
he's not wrong.
Well, to him, this is a guy who grew up during the Depression
Yeah,
and then went straight to World War II, and he was, what was he, like 21 or something?
sure.
So he saw rotting corpses and people's heads cut off and arms. So the fact that there's this lurid magazine kind of glamorizing, and I mean, to me, it was not so much the gore. I love the monsters, but the covers, these Basil
Yeah,
Gogo screaming skulls with an eyeball in it, and he just thought,
yeah,
I'm going to turn into a serial killer. But my mom kind of realized that I was creative,
right,
and so it was really supportive. I remember even before that third grade, we went to, they used to be what do they call them, party stores.
oh sure, yeah,
Party store had a little bit of everything. It had costume stuff.
right,
I mean, I guess there are now, there's like Party City and stuff, but these were mom and pop. There was a
right.
nice like New York couple. I believe they were very classic New York Jewish accents.
Uh-huh.
And it was on Van Nuys Boulevard, and it was a party shop, and they had naughty gifts, like jokes with like women's boobs was like the punchline, or a box like for the man knows everything, and it was like a sweater for your dick or something. It was like weird naughty things that you would look at, whoopee cushions, fake dog poop, novelties.
Yeah,
And then they also had like fangs and fake blood and
right.
like fake mustaches. So I love that place. To me, this is the, and they also had crepe paper and party plates. So my mom would go there to get stuff for things she was throwing
And this
to
is
her.
years before the existence of the pop-up Spirit Halloween
Oh
stores.
yeah, yeah. No,
Right.
this was the '60s
Yeah,
into the early '70s,
yeah.
and
We had Woolworth.
yeah, we had the Woolworths too, which had the little Halloween section. But this shop had, Woolworths did not have fake dog poop and
Right,
rubber vomit and spiders that would come out of a box.
right, and plastic
And they
boobies.
had the X-ray specs. They had everything you saw at the back of the the
Right.
Famous Monsters, sort of, or the comic books. Uh, and we went there one year, and I wanted to be Dracula because I'd
Sure.
seen the movie. And I'm like, okay. So they had a little cape, and they had the plastic fangs. And the guy who was there was like, no, he was, again, very New York. You gotta slick the hair back because Lugosi had his hair slicked back, and you gotta put the widow's peak. So we're gonna get you some black, makeup, and you gotta draw the widow's peak on, and
So this was Alec Baldwin ran this store?
yeah, no, he was a very he looked sort of like a cross between Henry Kissinger and Bill Bendix.
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah, with maybe a little. Well,
You
anyway,
may remember William Bendix from The Life of
Bendix.
Riley.
Yeah, whatever
No
floats the boat.
one, no one remembers that in our audience.
Yeah, look him up. Anyway, sort of like a living Fred Flintstone type.
And
But they were,
you got the folder that said, "So you want to be Dracula?"
yeah, no. He just kind of walked us through it. But I remember him saying, because I was a chubby kid, he's like, "You got a really round face. You're
You
gonna
want
want
to
to
shade in your cheeks.
shade the cheeks." And I was like, I was just hurt.
Yeah,
But he could tell I was fat. So we slicked my hair back, and my mom drew in a little widow peak and
yep,
and white pancake makeup to make myself look pale and draw on the like bloody lips and everything.
right.
I was very very enamored of this whole process. And then looking in the mirror, I looked like a Cabbage Patch Kid. I was like, this
Oh,
is not Dracula. I look like a moon-faced fat kid with black goop in his hair.
I look like Fatula.
You know, like, you know, but I went with it anyway and walked around school with my arm up
Sure.
like Bela Lugosi in both the original Dracula and the dentist or whatever in Plan
Yeah,
9 or
yeah.
Bela Lugosi, and would go blah, and it was the little hinged
Blah.
teeth, yeah, the little hinged teeth. But
Sure.
um, yeah,
Greatest things ever. Those hinged
it's
vampire
it's
teeth.
funny how these just talking about this, all these images are piling back in that I don't think about much. But
I
yeah,
just
that
remember.
pork chop.
We would go in probably maybe the beginning of October. Woolworth would set up their aisle
Yeah.
for Halloween stuff, and they had stack after stack of Ben Cooper boxes.
Mm-hmm.
Those crappy
That's
plastic
exactly, yeah.
mask
And a
costume
printed
sets.
nylon or
Yeah,
polyester
yeah,
onesie.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And when I was 3 or 4, I got a Batman costume, and I still have a photo of myself
Wow.
in it.
Yeah.
Doing the hip hands on hips pose and everything, and that was the greatest freaking thing ever. A couple years later, I realized that if I cut the face part off of it,
Right.
I could just use it as a Batman
Right.
cowl, right?
Right. Right.
And so my mom, who was extremely wonderful and supportive, and my dad
All of it.
too, made me a Batman costume with
Wow.
a cape with the scallops on it and a hood
Wow.
that I could wear this mask in front of.
Right. Right.
And she cut out a bat signal on the front, and I had my what was it? Space Force plastic utility belt
Oh,
that looked
utility belt.
almost exactly
Yeah.
like Batman's utility belt, but it
Yeah.
was plastic and it was from a set. Um, and I would wear black socks for gloves, and I had a pair of winter snow boots that I would wear that were also black. Um,
Nice.
but that was the best costume ever.
And it was
You
the
know?
feeling it gave you, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah, yeah,
did you look in the mirror much? It was more like I'm gonna be, and that sort of empowerment or whatever when I was a werewolf or Dracula,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and and it was funny. It was really about that feeling, which kind of right now, as I'm saying, it makes me understand why women like to dress up. Like they don't want to go out, and because men don't really dress up. I mean, maybe
No,
for an
right,
event, but it's not a thing. But women, put on the dog, as they say, with eyelashes and makeup and all that. And I just really right now went, oh, I get it now
yeah,
because I'm like, oh, you look great, babe. I don't need, but like when you put on again, it's not exactly parallel, but the idea of like putting on something that makes you feel empowered or
right,
like you are more than who you are.
yeah.
Yeah, I
So
guess
it's a big lie.
it's a huge lie, but it's fun. I don't know. Now it's funny. So that lasted well into my 20s. I mean, working at Lucasfilm, there were big Halloween
Sure,
parties. And so then we went, it was like Chris Walas's, like everyone out in the shop and, people were making their own prosthetics and we'll spend a lot of time, like you said. So it's funny. The kids stuff you do, maybe for a day or two became suddenly like 4 weeks, six
right,
weeks prep. And then when I moved back to LA and the Rick Baker shops and the Stan Winston shops and Screaming Mad George would have
sure,
these Halloween parties where, I mean, guys would spend months, and these are the guys who do it for a living. And I remember V. Neal would have a Halloween party. Rick
right.
Baker came one year as this busted out old biker hobo kind of guy.
Oh my goodness.
No, but you just knew it was somebody, but you couldn't recognize him. But it was really fun to see people go all out.
That's funny. I almost forgot all about Screaming Mad George. I met him in uh, South Carolina on the Abyss. He was in to sculpt one of the NTI towers, and I hung out with him a bit there. And he was so great. George
Anyway,
Taney. George Taney is his name, and he
he's
was
not at all screaming mad. That's what's so
no,
funny. He was
no.
the most
He's the
quiet guy.
sweetest, mellowest, quiet guy you'd ever meet.
I thought that because I thought the pictures of me, so I was like, yeah, like everyone did,
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
screaming and vampire teeth. And so I thought, oh, this guy's like crazy, this crazy. He was Asian, right, or part Asian.
Oh yeah, he was Japanese. Yeah,
Japanese. Yeah, that's what I thought. So I thought, oh, he's like this, kamikaze pilot energy. And then you meet him, it's like, well, thank you very much.
yeah.
He's very sweet. And you're like, oh, I get it. It's like calling a guy who's 6'8" tiny.
Right. And
Savage Holland. Yeah.
apparently it's exactly the same thing that H.R. Giger. He was
Really?
mellow and very sweet. Not at all the nightmare bringer.
I've heard the same of Rob Zombie.
Mm-hmm.
That he's kind of very thoughtful. I got to work and meet with David Cronenberg at dinner at his house, and he's more like Jeff Goldblum. He's like, yes, well, he's very thoughtful. He's like, he's like a college professor.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. And I mean, that's not. If you've ever seen any of the interviews, he's been interviewed enough that you kind of go, oh, okay.
Yeah.
But typically, they say the people who are monsters are. I was just reading about Tor Johnson, and they said his wife was upset because. They said anyone knew him said he was like Swedish Santa Claus, not this, bully monster.
But it's almost like they need to create this persona to protect the little kid.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I mean, I've just stayed a little kid. Like, I mean, I'll be professional, but even then, I'm always.
Yes, but you've become Harry Monster.
Well, I am. Oh, come on.
Oh, come on.
Come on, Bird. Sound more like Snuffleupagus. No, Bird.
Same guy.
But yeah. But so Halloween, it's back to the original question. Yeah, it's still. I just now, which is leading into our second topic, which starts with age. I wish I had the time, or the inertia, or even the space to do, I mean, because of the way I look, my go-to costume in the last few years has been the dude, because someone bought me the sweater for Christmas, and it's super easy, man. I just kind of part my hair differently and dye the goatee.
And some years you're pirate dude.
Yeah. Well, that was either a dude or pirate, and it takes me 20 minutes to get into costume, and that's because it's funny. It turns into a whole subject of hobbies, which we wanted to talk about too, the other H subject.
Yeah.
But doing the costume, designing it and everything, I remember I spent weeks, and then it became sort of in my late 30s, 40s, like, what can I put together in a day?
Right.
Like, out of all stuff I have, or 2 days, like over the weekend, that was sort of the challenge. And I remember I came up with some funny, weird combo, like mashups. Like one year I was Elvis Sushi, which is what I named it, which is basically had an old Elvis style jumpsuit, like that I'd used for a play or something in high school. And then I did my face up like a kabuki. I had long hair, so I dyed it black, put it up in a top knot. I put a parasol in it and did kabuki makeup. So I was Elvis Sushi, which was just, took 2 days. I don't know, fun stuff like that.
Every time I did a throw together costume, I was so disappointed that I said, I'm never doing this again.
Oh.
I need at least a month to prep.
Well, that's the problem. When you do it professionally, then suddenly that feeling of empowerment becomes a feeling of oh God, I'm a failure. This is awful. Yeah. Like how I can't. And then the thing is, because we're in an industry where, I wouldn't say you're judged, but you get a lot of street cred. And,
you're not judged.
Right. Well, if you come in jeans and a t-shirt, no one's going to judge you. Like, oh, okay, you just didn't come in a costume.
Yeah.
But if you come in a half-ass thing, you're like,
exactly.
Yeah. Unless it's a pun. I remember
you just become another disappointment.
Yeah, exactly. To ourselves.
Yeah.
Which is the worst. I doubt anybody was disappointed in your costume, whatever it was. They weren't like, oh, well, Darren was going to be,
No, I was looking for something better.
Yeah.
Wow,
Darren. I was
really disappointed.
I remember when guys were doing like full transformer things out of cardboard and plastic tubing, and you're like, Jesus, like that's well, Comic-Con now has become, cosplay.
Yeah,
it's basically Halloween.
It's become a thing. Yeah, it's become all year round.
And what's funny to me, and we should have a good cosplayer on, because I know a couple who it's their career, but I don't get how that's a career, going to conventions and prancing around in costumes, unless you're
they're selling photos and they're doing autographs.
Right, but I know, and that's what's weird. They've become famous as people who make costumes and wear them.
Right.
Yaya, what's her last name?
Sisterhood?
Yes, no. Her name is Yaya. She's an Asian American gal, and she does a lot of the anime costumes and amazing work. I met her at a costume contest in Utah in Salt Lake, and she and I were two of the four judges.
Were you Elvis Sushi at the time?
No, I was not in costume; I was a judge. But she was like queen of the ya. Oh boy, look it up. Anyway,
it's almost creeping out of your mind.
Yeah,
almost.
Exactly. Well, I don't want to sound like it's like literally a ya Hong or something. It's very Chinese sounding. But she was amazing, and she had turned it into a whole brand where she was licensing costume stuff and all that. I assume getting manufactured in China. But like that's the first person I met who's like, oh, I get how that is your career,
right?
Because it's your brand and you're selling things and how tos and all that. But all these other lovely gals you meet, and mainly gals, and I know there's some guys, but mainly women who go all out and have these amazing
because girls don't go to guys' tables who are dressing up. They just don't. That isn't a market.
I don't think guys dress up.
Well, because they don't get attention. They don't get attention doing it.
Well, there's guys who walk. I remember a guy dressed as like Superman, and he had a Chris Reeve. He looked like Clark Kent probably in his real life, and he was a great Superman. He was built, or he had a padded costume, and then there was a guy who looked exactly. I think we talked about this. Michael Clark Duncan from the Green Mile,
right?
Large black guy, bald, similar features. Had the outfit was just what is it? Overalls and a t-shirt.
Yeah.
And when he did the voice, I'm like, man, you look amazing. He's like, thanks, balls. I'm like, how you doing? He's like, I'm just tired, balls. I'm like, damn. I was like, that's amazing. But that's like me being the dude. When I do the dude costume it's grayer now, but I'm heavier. But people would get their picture with me. And one year at Comic-Con, I did it for a goof. Back when you could get 2 badges, and I had one badge to say Jeffrey Lebowski,
right?
And I got a lot of street cred for that. But that was easy. I think it's the last time I actually dressed up at all at Comic-Con. Normally I didn't, but it was so easy and fun.
What were some of the costumes that you went as when you were a kid?
Well, let's see. We Dracula, werewolf, that shitty Ben Cooper Spider-Man. Oh boy. Well, I think I've covered the memorable ones. The kind of Sesame Street hairy monster,
right.
/ Sweetums. I did a mummy one year where I wrapped. That was a nightmare.
Yes, but what did you dress as?
The hard part was we took sweatpants and wrapped and stitched, shredded
ace bandages, or
no? I think it was just. Gauze. Yeah, it was just gauze.
Oh.
And did that, and then my face, and then you realize this is a pain in the ass to just wear from unraveling.
I gotta go pee.
Yeah. Well, that's why sweatpants. We joked like you don't want to, and that was for trick or treating. And then, in your teens, you started doing like I'm a hobo.
Right.
I'm a cat burglar. Just easier stuff. I don't know. We stopped trick or treating around 12, 13. Then there's that weird gap where you're not really going to. I mean, if you're going to,
you're too old for trick or treating and you're too young for Halloween parties.
Going to parties where there's sexy nurses. Yeah. Right. But then in your late teens and 20s, boy, Halloween is like, oh boy, sexy nurses. I mean, just women start dressing down or.
Right.
Yeah, wearing very little and calling it, I'm a sexy, nurse or vampire or whatever. And you're like, oh, that's great. And but those are the costumes I remember. What about you?
Well, the last year where my mom and dad combined to make me a Superman costume.
Oh, nice.
It was great, and we have Super 8 film of me dressed up as it, and it's very fun. But then I started making my own, and of course, around this time, Star Wars came out, and so I made a full-on Darth Vader.
Wow!
From one of those Ben Cooper masks, and then I paper mache'd the back of it.
Oh wow!
And it was crap, and it was covered with electrical tape, but I made it, and it was fine.
The fun is making it at that point.
Yeah, definitely. But that's what led me to getting my own Darth Vader, because I wanted to have a real one.
You mean the life size?
The life size, costume I have on my
Yeah,
mannequin Skywalker.
yeah.
Uh,
Nice.
that's a little joke because his name
Yeah,
is Anakin.
very little.
See, but in 1980, was it 80? Yeah, right after Empire Strikes Back came out, I built a 3PO costume
Oh wow,
out of
wow.
out of cardboard and gold wrapping paper.
Yeah. Oh my
I
god.
built every piece. It was amazing for
Yeah.
13-year-old kid. Um, and I think I won something at the town Halloween contest.
Wow. How did you make the head? Because that's always the hard part.
Well, again, those Don Cooper masks,
Oh, Ben
or the
Cooper,
no,
yeah.
not Don Ben Cooper
Yeah.
masks. I started with the plastic, and then I made a back cowl for it.
Right, right. Wow.
Um, but that was amazing, and obviously the top of it looked better than the bottom because you put all your energy in the top, and then as you work down,
Oh,
oh,
crap cans,
it's
yeah.
like uh,
Well, it's amazing because kids now, our kids, guys our age, are 3D printing their 3POs
yeah,
and metallizing. My buddy of mine just did the whole thing. And then I know two of the guys who actually do 3PO for Lucasfilm, and they built
right,
their own, they 3D printed their own costumes.
yeah, and they're
And
amazing.
they're skinny dudes.
Oh, you have to be.
Yeah.
No one
I could
wants a fat 3PO.
eat Santa. No one wants a fat 3PO. Don't eat Santa. Um, Yeah, I could be a Gamorrean guard or your Jabba
Yeah,
in his teens, I guess.
yeah.
Han Solo. Uh, I was
I always wanted to make a Han Solo in carbonite, which
Carbonite. Yeah,
built a
yeah.
big cardboard box
I've
and
seen
just
people.
walk around in it.
I've
That
seen
would have
people
been
do
cool.
that where they paint their faces silver and.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, I at that point. Yeah, so that when Star Wars came out, I didn't. I was out of Halloween kind of until my early 20s.
right.
Or 19 to when I started Lucasfilm, realized, oh my god, I'm in the creature shop. I have all the tools
Yeah,
to make a rubber mask. I wish I'd done more. You're first of all, you're working 12, 14-hour days and you're
yeah.
exhausted. So the last thing you want to do is go back to work. Although I did sculpt stuff, I never,
I never showed
like,
anyone.
no, I just never cast them. I was just practicing sculpting because
Right.
I'm around all these amazing sculptors, and like I just have little side projects I do, just basically to, literally get my hands
To get
dirty.
better. Yeah, to get
Yeah,
better
yeah.
at it. Yeah.
It got to the point where I got to rough in stuff for Dave Sasala, which was nice. Yeah, so that's and then Halloween. The other thing for me was the Haunted Mansion at Disneyland. That just
Right.
the smell, the sounds, but the music. I think it opened in '68, right?
I believe so.
I think it was '68. So I was 6 or 7 when I went,
Yeah.
and that theme song on the organ. I remember right around October 1st every year, I just start humming that. Part of the ADHD thing is you usually have a tune in your head.
Yeah.
Would not, but this at least there was a reason. And I would walk around humming that all October until Halloween, and it just kind of it heightened the mood. Yeah. And I had the Halloween album,
Right.
which was kind
That
of a
that it had
Ron Howard.
an
Yeah.
orange border around it with the painting of the Haunted Mansion.
Well, there were two. There was the chilling, thrilling sounds of the Haunted Mansion,
Right.
which had a bunch of stuff that had nothing to do with the Haunted Mansion. And then there was a Haunted Mansion album, which had Ron Howard, and I don't know who the girl was, narrating as if they were going through. It was like, come on, we got to get out of this.
Was it
living
EJ
nightmare.
Peekers? Because she was on the like the Disneyland show version of Exploring Disneyland, the Sunday night show, Sunday night.
Oh, The Wonderful World of Disney.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But yeah, so it was Ronnie Howard. It's like, come on, and I was think Thurles Ravenscroft saying they entered a room, or maybe it wasn't, but it was that kind of voice.
Or maybe it was Paul Frees.
It was Paul. Was it Paul Frees?
I don't know. It could have been.
Could
have been either of them.
It was, yeah. It was that kind of thing. It was like, I remember it was like, Madame Leota, a truly disembodied spirit. And he sort of narrated the ride. But under the narration and the dialogue of the
was the
music.
Was the playback, yeah.
Yes, the waltz and the opening music when it goes, "If you ever
Dun,
been to a haunted
dun,
house,
dun,
yes,
dun,
welcome,
dun,
foolish
dun,
mortals."
dun.
So
That's Paul Frees.
yeah, that is he's the ghost host. And Thurl is the voice of the main singing head. So it had all that. So I loved that, and that just kept the mood going.
Yeah.
I mean, now Halloween is the second largest holiday in terms of money spent.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Christmas.
Because adults don't grow up.
Well, if they're lucky, yeah, they
Yeah.
don't have to. And that's why for 30 years I was pitching to the Muppets,
Yeah.
like, oh my God, you guys are Halloween. I mean, people dress up as you. Why aren't we doing a Halloween special? Like every year, every other year. Finally, the Haunted Mansion came out of that, but I gave up. And when the new management took over, I said, we got to do something with monsters or Halloween. I mean, that's the Muppets' roots. And they're like, yeah, thanks, kid. And then finally they came to me because it's Disney. They're like, what about the Haunted Mansion? We own that. I'm like,
Oh
sure.
yeah, don't we own that? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, we could do that. And then, I mean, the nice thing was they were really supportive because it's their IP and it wasn't
Yeah.
particularly original. It was just, I mean, I remember when we pitched it and they said, what about the Haunted Mansion? I said, yeah. And they go, well, what would the story be? I go, the story is the Haunted Mansion. You just got to get, some Muppets there. So we came up with the
You put the
concept.
Muppets in there, and then the story writes itself.
It kind of is written. I mean, if you know the ride, and we just, the movies have done it too. It's like the bride is the bad guy. And so but
It's
yeah,
funny
the
because
Haunted Mansion.
I didn't get to go to Disneyland till I was 18, till I came out
Yeah,
here.
well, if you don't grow up here, yeah, of
So
course.
I didn't get to enjoy that as a kid, but I made up for that.
Well, it's funny. My three favorite rides are Haunted Mansion,
Hmm. Pirates.
Pirates of the Caribbean, and the Tiki Room. And I
Yeah.
have a Tiki Room. I wrote a Muppet Pirate movie because I love.
Yeah.
In fact, I realized all my movies that I've directed or written and directed are based on a holiday
Uh huh.
or a Disneyland ride.
Or both.
No, there's only no. Yeah, they're all yeah. Well, let's see. Yes, or both. Yeah, obviously. Halloween's not really a holiday. I guess it is. It's a holiday.
Sure it is.
So yeah, so like Treasure Island was really me wanting to do the Muppets Pirates of the Caribbean. Haunted Mansion we covered, and then um, two Christmas movies and a Thanksgiving movie, and then
Yeah.
the only thing that wasn't that I directed was Christine McConnell, which is Halloween
Right.
essentially.
Right.
But we did have a Halloween episode, but the whole thing was a Halloween base. So yeah, I just got to do a romantic sitcom to break the mold.
Well, you just have to have it take place on a submarine.
Well, hey, well that's Tiki. Then we're back to Tiki. Captain Randy's submarine has a Tiki bar where we interview
Wow.
our guests. All right. Well, this was kind of segueing into hobbies, which the other
Yeah,
day.
because you said that you uh, didn't have time to work much on stuff because you were working.
Yeah, I mean, knock on wood. The
Yeah.
nice thing is working and doing things in this realm, designing or building or writing, directing things of that ilk. But yeah, building models. I used to build model kits. I used to
Sure.
sculpt, make masks, make stuff, and and also 32 years living in the same house, you get so full of stuff, including things to make things. Like I've got bags of celluclay, paper mache, and sculpting tools, and clay. Like, just
Yeah.
sits in the garage. And I'm like, oh, I want to. But the last thing you want to do after a long week is go, oh, I'm going to make a mess because you have to
Well,
carry.
that's the curse of doing work
No.
of something that you used to do for fun.
Yeah. Well, curse, but yeah, I get it. Yeah. There's Speaking of hobbies, and I just went last weekend to an amazing private residence in Anaheim Hills, where a guy has built a miniature and had worked with others, a miniature version of Disneyland rides. It's not Disneyland like in scale, but scale models. He's got the the opening. What do you call it? The railroad station when you
Yeah.
enter.
Main
He's
Street
got
Station.
Main Street Station. He doesn't have Main Street, but he has the castle, Cinderella's castle, or Sleeping Beauty's castle. He has he has amazing rock work. He brings in guys, and there's waterfalls and waterways, and it's all in his
Wow.
backyard. And he's an architect, and so this
That's
is his
cool.
hobby. He 3D prints the houses and the models and paints them, and it's gorgeous and remarkable. You can look it up. If you look up Anaheim Hills model, a Disneyland model, it'll
Cool.
pop up. His name is Dave uh, Shegog, which I said, what a great last name. I said, that
Wow.
sounds like a monster from a movie. That,
Well, yeah,
we have angered the Shegog. But lovely guy, amazing, amazing,
he lives
amazing.
next to Mount Doom.
Right, exactly. Yeah, there's Chernobog and Shagog. But he's built this labor of love. He charges, I think, $40 just to keep it up, and but
Right.
his house is also amazing. It's all green and green inspired arts and crafts stuff. So he and I headed off and just
Oh,
talked
I'll bet.
first about the monitor and then all about his house. And he was kind enough to show me around and like stunning architectural and furniture, everything. But that's exactly what we're talking about. Like he's an architect by day, so his hobby is to go make things.
Right.
Our we make things by day, so my hobby is to not make anything.
That's right. That's my
Just to
hobby
lay
is
in
to
bed,
not do that.
not do that. Yeah, but I'm always. I mean, model train guys are kind of the classic old version of that.
Yeah.
Where when I was a kid, I had an HO scale model railroad that my dad helped me build out of a big sheet of 4x8 plywood. I was gonna make, I was gonna do mountains and waterfalls and all this stuff, and then I realized I really just wanted to make a miniature. I didn't care so much about the trains.
In Star Trek: The Next Generation, Captain Picard also had a big train set.
Oh, really?
You know what size it was?
Engage.
Engage.
I didn't know that, and then I'm thinking of, wow, God, on the ship it would have to be engage. Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Well crafted joke. Engage. But you have to say it. Engage. I'm telling you how to tell your joke.
Yeah. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Let's not
So,
only.
what about you? What hobbies did you have growing up besides model making?
I loved working with recording equipment, tape recorders and
Oh,
record players, and I would do my own radio show
yeah.
to no one.
Yeah.
One Christmas gift was a microphone with a speaker attached to it,
Oh,
so you
nice.
could talk into it and hear your
Right.
voice coming out of it. Um,
You could also just do this.
Yeah, right.
Wow, I can hear my own voice. Yeah, no, I get it.
But it's really funny because most of my free time now is spent doing podcasts, which is exactly the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there's a lot less production value now than I did in my room as a kid, because I had a record player set up. I had two tape recorders. One was a live playback, and one was recording the whole thing. And I remember really wanting a mixer at one point, but I never got a mixer until I was in high school. But I loved doing that kind of thing, and I would do the same damn show over and over again with exactly the same songs that I would play on records, and just a crazy thing.
We did that with our neighbors. We just called it "Let's do a radio show," and there was never a script. There was an idea, and it was like we'd do either "You Bet Your Life" and kind of make up stories. But yes, we would have the record player, and I remember we had. I want to say it wasn't Mitch. It was he's a famous American composer. He did the Sandpaper Suite and the
yeah,
uh,
that's
it's not Mitch.
Leroy Anderson.
Leroy Anderson. So Leroy Anderson, because it's all there's no vocals, but it's like yeah. So we were like, we would start that and then fade it out. It was like, hey, it's time to whatever. I remember we do game shows. One was You Bet Your Body, and the idea was you would bet a body part. If I bet my leg, I can answer this question. And then we had.
Then you would cut off
the leg if you lose. We had a skill saw with no blade in it, so we go, "Oh, sorry, Bob, you got that wrong." He'd scream like, "All right, as they're bandaging Bob up, we're moving on to our next contestant." And we just thought it was hilarious. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, the Leroy Anderson. I think I bought the CD of it because it just made me happy, and it's very Americana.
Totally.
If
he used to be an arranger for the Boston Pops.
That would make sense.
That's the way he was able to get so many of his compositions out in the public, because Arthur Fiedler, the conductor, loved his work so much that he would put them on albums.
I think that's where you hear that being played, is by the Boston Pops.
Yep.
But if you've never heard his stuff, it literally makes you think of like May Mayberry or the 1950s version of
It,
America.
it's the musical version of Norman Rockwell.
Yes, perfect analogy. And it's happy and upbeat and fun.
And
And
Jerry Lewis performs the typewriter in I
yes, the
forget which
typewriter.
movie, um,
Yeah,
but that's another one of his little pieces that
yeah.
were extremely popular at the time.
They're very syncopated. His
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
pieces you remember at least are very. There's a lot of
Like
guitar.
jazzy
Yeah,
and simple melodies, but really well done.
but they sound like cartoon soundtracks, or and maybe they were used as this, and that's
They
why
absolutely were.
it's like, and also American TV show like morning shows, and they would use
Absolutely.
music to segue in. Speaking of music and cartoon soundtracks, I have a theory that, well, first of all, I don't know if a lot of people know that the guy Carl Stalling used for Bugs Bunny soundtracks, like the famous one Powerhouse,
Yeah.
was not Carl Stalling's
No.
writings.
No.
It was the work of, and now I'm blanking on his name. My brain's going. Yeah.
Leroy Shield.
No,
No, he did. He did.
no. It was, oh
He did
man.
Little Rascals. It's.
Yes.
I know exactly who it is because I have the CD of his original
Yeah,
recordings.
me too, which are great. Yeah, dinner music for cannibals
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
uh,
yeah. This is
uh,
what happens when you're old. You forget names.
yeah. Well, especially when I need to recall it quickly,
Yeah, yeah,
and it just goes, "Ha ha, fuck you," and runs away. I'm
yeah.
like,
Right.
no. Anyway, what's interesting was he worked with Jim Henson. He was an early that when we remember his name. He was an early adapter of synthesizers, and Jim Henson loved new tech stuff, and he wanted to this Henson family Thanksgiving special I directed. I was going to write and direct, and I was directing it. Was based on an idea Jim had in the late '60s called "The Musical Monsters of Turkey Hollow," and
Mhm.
he was working with this guy to make their weird little and it was all on the synthesizer, and you could actually buy an album of his playing. He built his own,
Wow.
um, but so that was the Jim Henson connection. Was something else that was
Raymond
uh,
Scott.
yes,
Raymond Scott.
Raymond Scott. Thank you. Um, Raymond Scott's music, when you listen to his original jazz, it was considered experimental jazz, modern jazz in the 30s and 40s.
Yeah.
Um, I think he was really influenced by klezmer music
Oh,
because
absolutely.
he always had a
Absolutely.
clarinet leading. But I always, if I were in college, that would be a thesis paper,
Oh,
like
that's
singing.
fascinating. Yeah,
And
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know if he's Jewish or he was around klezmer music or had lived in a neighborhood where it was all Russian immigrant
Right.
Jews, or but
Or if the availability of musicians in that area
right.
was that they were,
But
adept
man,
at that.
listen to. So I loved Ray Scott stuff when it came out in the '80s. You could get the LPs
Yes.
and CDs
Yeah.
in the '90s, and I was like, this is amazing. I love. And then when you hear the stuff that
But
they
that
didn't
that
even
run in
do,
Powerhouse,
yeah,
it's
right.
it's
Dun-dun-dun,
amazing.
dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun. And
Yeah.
amazingly complex music.
Yep.
But you take that and you listen to Kellezer music with the clarinet going,
Yeah.
you're like, oh my god, it's
It's the
it's
same. Yeah. It has the
literally
same
the
roots.
same. And maybe you're right. Maybe he used the musicians. But anyway, it would be interesting for all you college students out there in the music department. Look that one up. But it was interesting to me that he and Jim Henson were working together, and ultimately on the project that I ended up turning into a movie in the like 2015, I think,
Yeah.
called I think it was just called Turkey
Turkey
Hollow,
Hollow. Yeah.
The Legend of Turkey Hollow. Uh, so I got to work on
Ah,
something that Ray Scott touched the hem of his garment.
that's cool.
Yeah. I always liked music. You're talking about hobbies. As a kid, I tried to learn banjo because Steve Martin was a god,
Oh,
and
yes.
I thought that was fun. And
My
I did.
grandfather played the banjo, and he gave me one, and I tried, and I was never good at it.
It was the picking. My hands were not very
Yeah.
coordinated, um, and so I gave up. And then about eight, going on 9, 10 years ago, when I was doing a lot of directing and going to Vancouver, that's mainly where we shot all these things, or New York a couple times. And you're sitting on set, and a lot of directing or anything in a movie is you're sitting on the set. You can't leave because you need to be there to answer questions.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's an hour and a half for a light setup, or a whole new thing. You're turning the engine, the crew around. So there's just a lot of time sitting there, and it's too distracting to read. So I picked up ukulele because I thought,
Uh,
well, four strings, four fingers. I'm an idiot. It's small, it's portable, and I really
yeah.
enjoyed.
What is the most annoying thing I can pick up on set? And you
No, it
found
was
it.
great. Well, I didn't do the. I wasn't doing 1930s, Rudy Valley or 20s
Right.
Rudy Valley hits. I was learning like John Denver and stuff, and I was just learning it to learn a new thing in my 50s at that point, and or 40s, no 50s, and also I'd always loved music, and I loved to
Hmm.
sing and everything. So that's a hobby that I stuck with for about 4 years,
Mm.
and I have a collection of tenor guitars, which are basically the same thing as a baritone uke, which I ended up because of my vocal range enjoyed more than the tenor uke, which is higher. Basically, a baritone uke is the top four strings or the
Right.
four highest strings of a guitar. So yeah, that's become my hobby recently is just fiddling around. I would never
That's
perform. I'm
funny.
not that good, but
Making music was a definite hobby of mine in the 90s, in the
yeah.
late 80s and 90s, because my roommate at the time had this great synthesizer and a sequencer. And,
Nice.
I went all through grade school and high school playing the clarinet and learned how to read music and all that stuff. And I was going to be a musician until I decided to go to USC to go to film school.
Did
Um,
you ever try and play a Ray Scott uh,
I, I
piece on the
didn't I
piano?
didn't know about him at the time.
It
Uh,
seems to be like as a player with incredibly difficult.
oh, absolutely
I mean,
difficult.
it's like no, 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 no,
Yeah,
no, no.
yeah.
No.
God, my fingers are
Yeah,
clogged together.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, but I did learn the opening to uh,
My
the
three sons. No.
Rhapsody in Blue.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I can still play that. But
That's
um,
cool.
but in the 90s, when my roommate had this keyboard, I would spend hours trying to replicate pieces of music that I knew and do all of the parts for it. And
Both hands.
well, as much as I could, because I can play a little bit of piano, but I'm terrible at,
But
at,
that's what I
at
mean. You're like
integrating the hands. So I would do one part at a
pick
time.
out the melody. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. And all by sound, all by ear. Um, but I would get pretty good at sort of replicating these things, and I put together an album of all these pieces that half of them I composed myself, and half of them are recreations of
That's
stuff.
cool.
I did both versions of the Lost in Space theme. I did pieces from Indiana Jones and all sorts of stuff that I recreated on the synthesizer. Um,
Wow.
but I did that a whole lot, and then at some point I just stopped because I just didn't have the time anymore.
Well, the whole thing learning about ADHD, which I'm pretty sure I was diagnosed as having, because I was like, sounds so much like me. And one of the things is, if you have ADHD, you have like 30 hobbies and lots of projects that you've never finished. And it's that whole chasing the dopamine of the novelty of something and the fun of it. I think that's why people with ADHD love travel because it's always new and exciting, and there's a new thing to learn, a new thing to see, and a
Yeah,
new people to talk to.
I
And
put
then
the
you go
dope
home,
in dopamine.
ladies and gentlemen, again, comedy stylings of Robert Doctorman. Uh, so okay, so music, model making was big with me, and when I was a kid, I loved making
Sure, yeah.
models.
No, I did a lot of model building when I was in high school,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and uh, and that ended.
Well, drawing and painting. I was an avid oil painter as a kid, and then moved into acrylics, and I loved painting portraits. I just thought faces were fascinating, and I got really pretty good at it. In fact, one of the things I showed at ILM was my 2 3 oil paintings. I brought
Hmm.
up like an idiot because you couldn't put it on the internet. And I remember Nilo after I got the job, he asked me about it. Nilo Rodas,
Yeah,
and Nilo with his inimitable style is like, "You painted this?" I said, "Yeah." I was like 14 or 15. He goes, "Why did you? Why are you here? You should be a painter." I'm like,
yeah,
"Because it's Star Wars." Like
yeah,
painting portraits was not a job I ever considered, or being a classical version of an artist. But I remember I took it as I thought about it. I'm like, wow, that's a huge compliment coming from a guy who's
Yeah,
a
who's a
designer.
brilliant artist. Yeah,
Yeah, but it's funny. Most guys who are good with storyboarding or design are not painters, and vice versa. I mean, there are Ralph McQuarrie, I would say, is one of those
that's
guys.
funny because when I went to the Bob Abel remembrance
Yeah, yeah.
last time, I saw a friend of mine who worked there at the time called Ron Croce.
Mm-hmm.
And he is a fine artist now. He does these paintings. He
Right.
lived in Hawaii and does all these sort of surfer paintings and beautiful oil and watercolors. But I met him on Junior. We were working on the movie Junior with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and we sat opposite each other at drafting tables, and I got to know him pretty well. And he was always talking about how uh, valid a calling was to be an artist, an actual, fine artist.
I understand.
And when I saw him when I was there, he said, "Did why did you never become a fine artist? You have the capability of it, and I always thought that you could have done that." And I said, it just never grabbed me, you
Yeah.
know, and that has to happen if you're going to devote your life to something.
I think for me, a big part of it, because I considered it being an illustrator, even at least was
Sure.
sort of the job version of it. Partially because my dad in particular was like, he told me, I think I've said this a number of times on our podcast, but all artists are bums because his artists, what he thought of were the guys in Paris during World War
Right.
II
Right.
selling paintings of the Eiffel Tower and sitting there smoking Chaton in their shitty pants, living in crappy
Yeah.
apartments. And he said, "You don't want to be an artist. That's there's no living in it. There's no money in it." He said, "All the guys you see in the museums that are paintings are worth anything. They're all dead. That's why the
Yeah.
paintings are worth something."
Yeah.
And so that sunk in. I'm like, "Yeah, I don't want to do that." And even when I did just paint for fun, I always was like, well, "What do I paint? I don't want to do a landscape. I mean, just a landscape. Like, okay, I did, and then what's funny is, as I became I took art history in college, which I loved at UCLA.
Mm.
Two courses from primitive to I think the Renaissance, and then Renaissance to modern art, and I just loved all of it. And fascinating to me because it was art and history tied together. Like,
Yeah.
and until really the 20th century, most art was driven by patrons. It was an
Yeah.
artist
Yeah.
for a living, but you were a gig. I mean, it was like being a songwriter. There's not any difference. Like, here's the thing I'm going to spend 6 months or a year on, and then take it to a salon and see what the jerks of the day think of
Well,
it, and then
it's
hopefully
like
some money.
Francis Coppola's quote. He said, "You can always tell the stage of a civilization by who
Right.
is paying the artists."
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, at one point it was the church. At
Right.
another point it was
Rich,
corporations.
rich patrons or
Yeah.
corporations,
Yeah.
and then it became
Then it became no one.
right. Well, it's interesting as we talked a little bit about this in a previous podcast about the guy who's the famous Playboy artist Leroy Neiman,
Yeah.
uh, who did these garish, every color in the book paintings of football players and race cars and golfers.
Yeah.
I remember going to a gallery saying, "Why is this guy so popular?" It's because the men who are businessmen buy the art, and the wives go, "Well, it's got the blue of the couch in it, so that'll work." Um, and then just reading more about art history and kind of there was a great book, I forgot the title of it, but it was all about how modern art was sort of promoted by the CIA to American modern art,
Right.
to like Rothko and Jackson Pollock and all that,
Yeah.
to shame the Russians, to beat the Russians in the kind of psyops of like, this is art, because
Oh,
the
that's
Russians kind
interesting.
of always stayed with classical paintings
Yeah.
of buildings and people and flowers and
Wow,
still
that's
life.
fascinating.
Oh no, there's a whole book. I mean, you can just Google it now. Um, but they were promoting. They were very involved in the modern art scene, including like
And you know what they're
yeah,
behind now? AI.
um, well, yeah, we talked about it last time about art. There's no mistakes in art. I mean,
Yeah.
look at a Jackson Pollock painting. You
Yeah.
can't go, well, you missed the mark on that one. Those drips are terrible. Or a Rothko. Like, I think, was it a Rothko they hung upside down for years?
Yeah. Yeah. And no one realized it. Yeah.
And, until someone saw it and said, oh, no, you're like, yeah, right. Okay.
That's funny.
Um,
During my stint on What About Bob, working with Frank Oz,
Yeah, it's great.
There was a whole section of the movie that is cut out that is about Bob's mother, and she is a fine artist, a fine modern artist.
Oh
And
wow.
so I had to do all these sort of versions of Rothko's and
Yeah.
all
Pollock.
these sort of Pollock and all these sort of you know known modern art works, but not any of the modern artworks. And so I did a whole bunch of
Right.
them, and then the whole thing was cut out from the script.
Well, that's been a career plus for you. You've done that a few times on Master and Commander, doing replicating art styles for the screen.
Oh yeah,
That
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
For like
Um,
the etchings in the doctor's
yeah,
books and things like that. Yeah,
those
yeah,
are
yeah.
gorgeous in Master and Commander. I did
Thanks.
not know that for years that you've done that. You could do a book of that.
Oh,
The,
but one other thing I did was in the
yeah,
movie Outbreak.
yeah,
There's this drawing in crayon that this little girl draws of the monkey,
yeah.
and
And you did.
it's in the forest, and it's up on the refrigerator. But I did that and had to draw as a 9-year-old girl,
Which
and
was
it's
did you
probably
put on?
my best
Did
work.
you put on a dress and ponytails just to get into the character? Um,
I'm not going to say
all
because
right.
that will give away my method.
What's funny too now is you go to Comic Con and you see these illustrators who American illustrators or illustrators anyway, but American illustrators from probably the you know 1910 up through
Yeah,
maybe like 5-10 years ago.
they were all advertising.
Those are all in advertising or book covers, which is it was all
Same thing. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, and they're amazing. I mean, back from N.C. Wyeth and Maxfield Parrish
yeah.
and the early guys
Well,
and
Haddon Sundblom, who
Hans Sutherland invented
invented Santa Claus,
yeah, the
basically.
American version of Coca
Yeah,
Cola. Yeah, there's a book out on Haddon Sundblom. It's amazing,
yeah,
and George Petty, and then all the way up to like Robert McGinnis and the guys who did
yeah.
Drew Struzan is probably the last famous illustrator who
That's true.
developed a style that was copied and lauded. But fine art world was taken over by charlatans and
Yeah,
crooks. Um, and the stuff that's peddled as art. I mean, Basquiat. I don't know. I saw that stuff. I mean, I was in New York when he was the rage. I
yeah,
was like, this is just. And again, I'm very blue collar, I guess, or bourgeois in my
yeah.
taste. Like, there's no skill there. I mean, one of the things I always want to do because I admired Steve Martin as a comedian my entire life, but he's a huge collector
A
of modern art.
huge collector of
I
modern art.
always
Yeah,
wanted to go have dinner with him and go, okay, I get your comedy. I love your comedy. I love the silliness, the surrealism, the making fun of kind of the dopey everyman. But what is it? Why are you spending 5 million of your many millions on a Rothko? And because at least in art history class at UCLA, I asked the question, why is it important? He goes, because it was there. It was like, why did they climb Mount Everest? Why? And this is before the word had come out that CIA had promoted like
right.
Pollock and those guys. Because no one had done it before. No one had taken a soup can and said this is art. And what's crazy is I get that. I get modern art historically. I don't get the value.
Right.
But I guess it's like owning a piece of history, like, Abraham Lincoln's hat or something. It's like, this is the first guy who dripped house paint on a giant canvas and, got it. And now it's worth $8 million. And you're just like, but I literally could hire Darren Doctorman for $80. Okay, $800 to give me, maybe not as big. I'm saying a small one. We should just do that, like a series of. And then I loved when Norman Rockwell kind of poked fun at it with his painting of the critic,
Yeah,
and but I remember, and art historians and even art dealers will bristle at the well, my 5-year-old could do that. Yes, but did they? But the day
right.
it's like, yeah, once they, and I get it, the concept, like they were the first one to say this is art. And you're like, okay, so now anyone can make art. No, because it's not a Pollock now. It's just someone ripping off Pollock.
Right.
Yeah, but art always begets art. In fact, Drew Struzan used to have a great. I took his class where we all went up to Big Bear. It's either Big Bear or Lake Arrowhead,
Yeah.
and we were there at a camp, like one of the Boy Scout camps that was fallow during the winter. And it was like 5 days, and we'd eat, sleep, and we'd talk art all day. He'd give demos.
That's
It was
awesome.
amazing. Oh yeah, there were great illustrators there. Thomas Blackshear
Yeah.
was there, who I'd become friends with earlier, and oh gosh, anyway, a couple other guys, all really good artists. And but he would talk about there is no sort of art has become like everything's been done. Like
Right.
we're eating we're eating our
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
turf.
It's
And
yeah.
there's nothing new in
It's
two
all
dimensions.
derivative.
Yes, it's all derivative. There is no new there. He said the new art is going to be somehow interactive or something. You know, computers were burgeoning and getting interesting, and people even back in the '90s, even at SIGGRAPH, they were doing virtual sculpture where you had to put on goggles and you could
Right.
manipulate around it. But it was sort of like it was a 3D movie that was triggered by where you were during it. So it wasn't a film, and it was a new kind of art. And he was like, that's where new things will be created because yeah, everything in the art world is derivative of something. And he said, not that that's bad, but I
Right.
mean, this is the guy who made his bones doing like Arthur Lion or Lion Decker style pieces for
Yeah.
ILM and for Alice Cooper album covers, and
That's
he
right.
knew exactly what he was talking about. But it was also a way to make a living. And he was an amazing technician. And so we would even talk about modern art and what there's no artistry to the art. It's
Well,
more
there's no
about
there. It's all
well,
it's
yeah,
all a
like
scam.
it's all marketing. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's someone saying this is important, and oh, it's a Basquiat. So then you find out rich people buy it not because they particularly like it, because it's
No,
investment.
because they think that it'll be good, and
Well, and
and they
it'll
trust the people that are dealing it.
yes. So it kind of becomes its own game. It's like we're saying that Basquiat is important. So if you buy it now for $600,000,
Yeah.
in 10 years when he ODs or whenever he
Yeah. Right.
died, it'll be worth $6 million. And
Yeah.
so they buy it as an investment more than like I mean they'll hang it in their living room unless they get the guys who do the duplicates so the real one can't get stolen. Which I love that story.
Oh my gosh, that's
People,
so
yeah.
great.
Um, so it is a crazy the art gallery world is something uh, that I love going to galleries, especially like plein air painting where people are just doing
Right.
beautiful landscapes and stuff. Like I wouldn't. I have a couple in my house that I just loved and they're beautiful, but I wouldn't do that on my own except just
Right.
to do it. I liked portraiture because you're trying to capture an essence or something. There's a challenge
Yeah.
to it.
I got okay at doing caricatures for a while,
Yeah, yeah, I did that.
and I got to do one again on What About Bob. I did one of you
Bill
know
Murray or
Bill Murray,
no.
and he liked it so much he made T-shirts for everybody with it.
Aw,
So that
that's a
was cool.
compliment.
Yeah, yeah. I got to find that. I got that
Was it
image.
Bill with that kind of sneery
He's like,
kind of
yeah.
yeah yeah voice that face. Um, so do you paint or draw for fun anymore?
For fun? No,
Yeah.
no. My job completely took that urge away.
So what do you do for fun? Do you have any hobbies
Not now. Like I
now? Yeah.
said, I dropped the music thing because it was just too time sucking.
Well, and there's no end to. I mean, it really is just for the joy of
Yes,
I play
yeah.
the thing, and I wish that's what in my mind retirement is like making little for me. It'd be making little movies or doing little paintings.
We're
But then I'm like,
we're not
but,
going to be able to
but then I'm
retire.
not really retiring. I'm just
We're not going to
which
retire.
well, that's what I mean. But is that it's sort of like comedy for years being a writer on TV and movies where people are telling you unfunny people are telling you that's not
Right.
funny or you need to change this.
Look,
I always thought stand up would be great because you're making people laugh and there's no executive telling you you can't tell it.
the secret is hobbies are for people who hate what they do for a living,
I Yes, it's true.
and we are both blessed and cursed with being able to make money from something that we love to do.
So okay, well let's talk about hobbies and retirement. Retirement in the big picture, like
Yeah.
you don't need to work anymore, or you don't
Right.
have to. What would you fill your days with? For right now, I think for 6 months, I would just lay around and watch YouTube videos and
Yeah,
learn.
maybe there would be a certain space of time that would happen.
You know,
But honestly, I love doing the stuff that I like doing.
right? But
I like doing 3D stuff. I like making art. I like, you
so
know,
you would
I
do
would
what
do
you
the
do.
same thing.
Right. You design a new Enterprise or a new Starship class. Just do
Who
it.
knows? But yeah, I mean,
Well, I mean, just saying, yeah. Yeah. The fun, part of the fun, I
part
would
of the
say,
fun.
part of the fun, or it's the challenge, I think.
Yeah,
It's the application of arts, applied arts, which was always joyful to me. Is like you're trying to solve a problem, and the problem could be, what does a aquatic alien look like that lives on the bog planet,
sure.
and will George like it or whatever?
The,
There's
it's
some,
the constant striving to get closer and closer and closer to what you have in your mind.
or yes, or what what the producer, director, whatever has in their
Yeah, but
mind.
no, we're talking about after we retire.
Oh, you're talking about after?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
Well, that is the big driving goal of art, is to get what was in your head out.
Yeah.
And I think, again, to bring up Jim Henson, who was a huge influence, his thing was, he had a thing in his head, and he liked to share it and go, "Hey, I
Yeah.
have this idea. What could this be?" And it was always a yes and kind of situation. He wasn't like, "I have this," and keep hammering away until it's what's in my head. I can't communicate it. It was more playful, and I do miss that. I haven't really experienced that, except when I'm creating that energy and when I'm directing and I hire artists I admire and I go,
Right.
"I want this kind of thing, and here's a rough sketch." And I think one of the things that I admired about Jim, when I first saw Jim Henson's drawing, I'm like, "Well, that guy can't draw," but he could communicate an idea, and I used to talk about that.
Yeah.
We talked about storyboard art's indication. Jim could kind of throw out the idea of what he was thinking of,
Yeah.
and then people who are really talented at sewing and cutting and foam, and then they would add to it and make it work, whether just mechanically.
I just remember seeing one of his early drawings of Big Bird with
Big
the
Bird, yeah.
operator in it. It looked nothing like Big Bird, but it was exactly Big Bird.
Exactly. It was the idea. So I always said I'm more of a designer than an illustrator.
Yeah.
I always like, here's the idea. It's just enough there to inspire someone, or even myself. Okay, I'm going to go play with the clay or the computer or whatever to take it further.
Yep.
And I think Jim was never like, "Well, that doesn't look like my drawing." He's like, "Oh, yeah, that's great." Oh,
No,
cool.
he always wanted people to plus his ideas.
Yes, the collaboration, I think, is what I would miss. A long way of saying, I think what I would miss is the collaboration. Because, like, sitting in a room sniffing your own farts, going, "Okay, I made the thing that I wanted to make.
Yeah.
Now what? Like, now it sits on the shelf." I don't know. Retirement doesn't seem. The part of retirement that seems nice is not pleasing other people who are not great at explaining what they want. When they're Jim Henson, or other directors, producers who know, like, they hire you because they like what you do, and they go, "Yes, perfect, great, let's do that." There's this frisson of like, "Oh my gosh, yay!" But doing it for yourself, you're never going to be happy. That's
if I ever retire, I want to spend it going to visit friends and making stuff.
Well, yeah,
that's what I want.
And that's what we did at Muppets and at ILM. You were with friends, and you made cool stuff. I think travel is the other thing that's
sure.
Everyone, there's a reason that most travel agencies are 80% funded by people over 60,
right,
or over 55, because then they've made their bones and they're like, "I want to go see the shit I never got to see because I was too busy working."
Yeah.
Well,
look, collaboration is a wonderful thing, and I'm so glad to be able to collaborate with you on this wacky podcast, and we're at the end of another one. But I hope everyone enjoyed talking about Halloween and hobbies and Hobbyween. What?
Art. And may you all have a fabulous Halloween and get all the candy. We didn't even talk about candy.
We didn't even talk about candy because that's not what it's about, man. It's not what it's about.
Right, man.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Well,
on the
you might see us. I don't think we'll see them.
I see them. I see them in my mind's eye.
Wow.
And it's not pleasant.
Put some clothes on. Well, not you. You can stay that way, but the rest of you, put some clothes on.
See you next time.
Bye.
The Weirded Beardos are Kirk Thatcher and Darren Doctorman. Email them at theweirdedbeardos@gmail.com.